Hong Kong's skyline normally glows like a postcard, but one night a cluster of towers turned into a vertical inferno that stunned the entire city. Flames raced rapidly up the Wong Fuk Court towers, climbing scaffolding and wrapping the night sky in a sheet of orange fire visible across the district. More than 100 residents, many elderly and living on higher floors, were trapped before they could react, and several never managed to escape alive. Across the city, people asked how a modern metropolis with strict regulations could still suffer a fire so overwhelming, and how no one stopped it earlier. This tragedy was not a random accident, but the culmination of safety failures that had built up silently for decades across countless older residential blocks. Investigators later found flammable scaffolding mesh and cheap insulation wrapped around the towers, showing how cost-cutting had replaced proper safety priorities. Government inspectors had already issued warnings months earlier, but essential fixes were delayed repeatedly, leaving dangerous conditions untouched. What failed that night was more than a facade. It was an entire maintenance ecosystem that collapsed after years of neglect and fragmented responsibility. As smoke cleared, residents placed white flowers and demanded real accountability, unwilling to accept another vague explanation for preventable deaths. To understand why such a disaster happened, we must look back decades to the origins of Hong Kong's vertical city and the compromises made during its rapid growth. The 1953 Shek Kip Mei fire swept across hillside settlements, destroying entire neighborhoods and leaving nearly 50,000 people homeless overnight. The colonial government responded by launching massive public housing blocks, built quickly and cheaply to shelter thousands rather than to last for generations. Long-term safety, fireproofing, and maintenance systems were afterthoughts, secondary to the urgent need to provide roofs for thousands of displaced families. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Hong Kong multiplied these concrete towers rapidly, shaping the dense high-rise environment that defines the city today. These emergency-era towers were never engineered to survive 50 or 60 years without heavy renovation, yet many continue standing far beyond their design limits. Today, hundreds of thousands still live in these aging blocks, many of which have received only patchwork repairs instead of meaningful structural renewal. Hong Kong grew vertically faster than its institutions could mature, leaving no maintenance system capable of keeping pace with its rapidly aging towers. The city's vertical identity began as an emergency solution, and that crisis-driven legacy continues shaping the safety risks Hong Kong faces today. Hong Kong now has more than 9,000 buildings over 50 years old, aging far faster than any realistic inspection or repair system can manage. Each year, thousands more cross the 50-year threshold, creating an aging curve that accelerates faster than authorities can stabilize or upgrade. By 2030, nearly 14,000 buildings will exceed 50 years, making Hong Kong one of the densest aging building clusters anywhere in the world. About 3,000 Three-Nil buildings have no management, no owners committee, and no representative, leaving them structurally vulnerable for decades. These buildings lack leadership to organize repairs or negotiate with authorities, allowing dangerous conditions to accumulate quietly year after year. Even public rental housing is aging, with nearly a quarter of units now more than 35 years old, and requiring large-scale renewals soon. 1 in 4 public rental households consists entirely of seniors, meaning the most vulnerable people often live in the most fragile buildings. For elderly residents in aging towers, every fire alarm, blocked exit, or electrical failure becomes far more dangerous than statistics alone suggest. Together, these numbers reveal a city aging from the inside out, not only in its concrete structures, but also in the systems meant to maintain them. The issue is no longer whether buildings are old. It is what happens when thousands of old high-rises begin failing simultaneously in a vertical city. In a city built upward, aging becomes structural rather than cosmetic, affecting safety, evacuation, and stability on every floor. Hong Kong's challenge isn't the absence of regulation, but the difficulty of applying modern standards to thousands of towers built under past eras. Hong Kong has some of Asia's strictest fire and building codes, yet enforcing modern rules on thousands of aging towers remains enormously difficult. Older buildings rely heavily on voluntary upgrades, and when dozens of owners disagree, even essential repairs can stall indefinitely. Laws require fire doors, sprinklers, and accessible escape routes, but fragmented ownership often keeps these upgrades stuck on paper. Inspectors may issue warnings, yet they cannot force hundreds of private owners to coordinate costs or complete major renovations on schedule. As a result, enforcement becomes slow and symbolic, with recurring inspections revealing the same unresolved hazards year after year. The core issue isn't corruption, but complexity, outdated rules, fragmented ownership, and no central authority empowered to act decisively. Even with subsidies, owners struggle to agree. Some can't afford upgrades, others distrust contractors, and many fear forced relocation. Strong regulations become weak in action, creating gaps where aging systems deteriorate quietly until a tragedy exposes the accumulated risk. Modern skyscrapers sit beside fragile mid-century blocks, producing a city where cutting-edge safety coexists uneasily with outdated infrastructure. The issue isn't missing laws, but missing mechanisms. Hong Kong lacks the tools to enforce modern safety across an entire forest of aging towers. Redevelopment sounds simple, but in Hong Kong it becomes a decade-long struggle tangled in ownership disputes, legal thresholds, and logistical barriers. Many older buildings have dozens of owners, and a single refusal can halt an entire redevelopment project for years. Hong Kong requires 80 to 90% consent for redevelopment, a threshold notoriously hard to reach in income-diverse aging districts. Even when owners agree, developers hesitate because high construction costs and tight land supply make profit margins extremely thin. Densely packed districts lack temporary housing, turning resident relocation into a logistical nightmare that delays construction timelines. Legal disputes, valuation fights, and compensation negotiations routinely drag out for years, freezing entire neighborhoods in a state of limbo. In such vertical density, delays multiply quickly, and what takes months elsewhere often stretches into many years in Hong Kong. Meanwhile, buildings continue aging as leaks, concrete decay, wiring failures, and fire hazards accumulate quietly without timely repair. Residents feel trapped, unable to sell, unable to renovate, and unable to relocate because housing elsewhere is far too expensive. Many districts become stuck between decay and redevelopment, too old to be safe yet too complex and valuable to demolish easily. Each passing year deepens this paralysis, widening the divide between Hong Kong's modern skyline and its aging, unstable foundations. Despite its wealth and engineering talent, Hong Kong struggles to renew itself, leaving its most at-risk buildings firmly stuck in the past. Singapore and Hong Kong both face severe housing shortages, yet Singapore pursued aggressive renewal while Hong Kong became trapped in aging buildings. Singapore's government consolidated land early, enabling large-scale redevelopment without the ownership fragmentation that stalls Hong Kong's progress. With centralized ownership, upgrades and renewals proceed quickly, avoiding years of disputes that plague Hong Kong's multi-owner buildings. Singapore's HDB system replaces aging blocks through coordinated planning, ensuring entire estates are modernized before risks accumulate. Residents relocating for redevelopment receive clear compensation and guaranteed rehousing, reducing resistance and speeding the approval process. In contrast, Hong Kong's compensation varies wildly, and disagreements among owners routinely stall projects long before construction begins. Statistically, Singapore renews aging housing far faster, replacing entire estates, while Hong Kong struggles to renovate buildings individually. Singapore's system minimizes aging clusters, keeping most public housing under 50 years old through consistent, large-scale renewal cycles. Hong Kong, lacking centralized authority, must negotiate with thousands of private owners, making renewal slow, fragmented, and often impossible. The contrast shows how early land policy decisions shaped long-term resilience, giving Singapore structural advantages Hong Kong can't easily replicate. Singapore isn't perfect, but its coordinated renewal system reveals why its aging risks remain manageable while Hong Kong's continue growing. Many Western cities also face aging infrastructure, with thousands of mid-century buildings now reaching stages where major structural renewal is unavoidable. New York alone has over 60,000 buildings older than 70 years, many carrying outdated wiring, aging facades, and insufficient fireproofing. Chicago's older high-rises struggle with decades-old electrical systems and fireproof materials that no longer meet modern safety expectations. London faces similar challenges where Victorian-era blocks and aging council housing require costly upgrades to remain structurally safe. Across these cities, maintenance has fallen behind. As aging accelerates faster than budgets, manpower or political will can keep pace. Unlike Hong Kong, many Western buildings are shorter, but their age still poses fire, electrical, and structural risks that grow each passing decade. New York regularly reports facade collapses, falling debris, and emergency evacuations caused by deterioration in mid-century apartment towers. London's Grenfell tragedy highlighted how outdated materials and weak oversight can turn a single building failure into a national catastrophe. Chicago's aging towers reveal how cold weather cities also face risks, from frozen pipes to brittle wiring hidden behind aging walls. Together, these examples show that aging infrastructure isn't a local issue. It's a global challenge shared by the world's most developed cities. But Hong Kong's vertical density amplifies every weakness, making failures more dangerous than in cities where buildings are lower and spread out. The comparison raises an uncomfortable question. What happens if multiple aging towers begin failing simultaneously in a hyper-dense city like Hong Kong? When maintenance stalls and redevelopment freezes, safety risks accumulate silently until a single spark exposes years of ignored structural weakness. Aging towers face compounding threats: faulty wiring, blocked fire exits, brittle concrete, and outdated alarms that fail when disasters strike. Residents increasingly feel unsafe, reporting frequent leaks, power failures, and hallway cracks that hint at deeper structural decline. Vulnerable groups, especially seniors, are disproportionately affected, struggling with evacuation and navigating outdated safety layouts. Emergency responders face challenges too, as old buildings often lack clear access routes, reliable hydrants, or functioning ventilation systems. Fire spreads faster in older structures where insulation, scaffolding, and paint materials may no longer meet modern fire-resistant standards. When disasters occur in dense cities, failure in one building can disrupt entire blocks, triggering wider evacuations and citywide disruptions. Insurance costs rise sharply as older buildings become harder to insure, and premiums climb due to frequent structural and fire hazards. Economically, the city pays a long-term price, as deteriorating housing reduces productivity, increases healthcare burdens, and destabilizes communities. Ultimately, the cost of inaction becomes far greater than the price of renewal, making proactive rebuilding the only sustainable long-term strategy. Hong Kong now faces a defining choice: continue patching aging buildings or commit to a sweeping renewal strategy before risks escalate further. The government must strengthen enforcement, ensuring safety upgrades are not optional but unavoidable obligations across all aging districts. New financing models may be necessary, helping lower-income owners fund repairs and reducing the deadlock that stops redevelopment. Stronger centralized oversight could streamline negotiations, preventing projects from stalling due to dozens of competing private interests. Hong Kong may also consider Singapore-style estate renewal, replacing entire clusters rather than struggling with isolated building repairs. Without systemic reform, small hazards will continue compounding until a preventable disaster once again exposes the city's aging weaknesses. Global cities offer cautionary lessons. Aging infrastructure becomes unmanageable once decay outruns policy, funding, and political urgency. Hong Kong must act before reaching that tipping point, investing in long-term renewal rather than temporary fixes that merely delay deeper problems. The city's future stability depends on confronting its vertical aging directly, not waiting for another tragedy to force overdue reforms. Ultimately, the question is simple: will Hong Kong rebuild on its own terms, or wait until disaster makes the decision for it?